Welcome everyone. My name is Thabo Masombuka. I am from the Speakers Firm. Welcome and thank you for choosing to join the Empower Entrepreneurs Digital Conversations, the COVID-19 discussion hosted by EmpowerWorks. A very special welcome to our keynote speaker, Mr. Thabo Masombuka, former CEO of Construction Sector Charter Council. We have a broad representation of stakeholders joining us directly via Zoom, and they'll post their questions on the chat box. At the end of the keynote, there will be a Q&A, and we will respond to as many of your questions as possible. To get a direct invite to the next talk tomorrow, the 27th of May, by Thabo Masombuka, founder of Brand Leadership and Brand Africa, please direct your information to our WhatsApp number 082 088-5262, or visit EmpowerWorks website, www.empowerworks.co.za, where you can also get information around about empowerment, empower women, empower youth, speakers firm, leadership summits, and other events that are hosted by EmpowerWorks. We are live on the following EmpowerWorks digital platforms: YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and the hashtag that we've been following for these conversations is Empower Entrepreneurs. COVID-19 has changed the world, and for somebody passionate about transformation, legislation, the frameworks in which we have to do everything, making shortcuts perhaps during this time is not the wisest thing that anybody can do. But let me not go too much into the detail and hand over to Mr. Thabo Masombuka, former CEO of Construction Sector Charter Council, to take us through his passion points tonight. Over to you, sir. If I hand it over to our speaker, give me 1 second to just check where the speaker is. It's probably muted. Apologies. Let me unmute you. Give me 1 second. Try to unmute you on your side, sir. Thank you.
It's unmuted. Thank you very much. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, you are loud and clear. You can go ahead, sir.
It's a try and error. It's a try and error state of affairs in the state of our economy at this day and age. It presents with it a whole number of digital challenges, which all of us must, and I'm saying must because we do not have an option, must navigate ourselves in, because it's either we adapt or we perish. And linking up to today's discussion, you would have recognized that the nature of doing business has evolved within a short space of time. It has moved drastically and rapidly from a traditional form of business where there's a meet and greet handshaking of individuals before they can engage in a business transaction to literally a stranger-based form of doing business, where business referral is an order of the game, and business confidence or trust happens on literally an unfamiliar territory and platform. The COVID-19 presents us with those difficulties and complexities. Therefore, business entrepreneurs in general are compelled to place themselves in a situation where they familiarize themselves with a new way of doing business. Electronic online business engagement is a permanent feature or a significant feature of that. But maybe just to start, and as guided by your discussion point, my initial inputs would be that any online business transaction is not different than any other business or business agreement or any form of an agreement that exists in law. It must first meet the essential elements of every agreement, meaning the people involved or the parties involved in a business transaction must first and foremost agree that they are engaging in a business transaction. In other words, there must be an intention to engage in such. Once there's such intention, then you must have what is called an appreciation of your rights as a participant, your rights and responsibilities. Once we've done that, you must then have what is called consensus. And consensus can only happen when that consensus exists between the parties that are involved. But what is more critical, and especially in view of the type of business engagement happening as a result of the COVID now, where people trade online, where people shop online, where people order equipment online from people that they've never met before, what is critical is that you must, as a transacting party, always ensure that the people or persons or parties you contract with have the capacity to contract. You would know that in business generally, COVID or no COVID, they are generally chance takers. People we call con men and women. People who over misrepresent their authority and capabilities. People who misrepresent their powers and authorities. People who sell you what they are legally not entitled to sell you. We've seen it in transport, we've seen it in mining, where people would come and sell a mining operation where they do not even have the authority to do so. So COVID-19 is obviously going to create an even more conducive environment for chance takers to thrive. So all business persons who are capitalizing or entrepreneurs capitalizing in the space must be mindful of those kind of type of business transactions that they are expected to engage themselves in. How important is an in-person contact when concluding a business online or a business agreement? Traditionally, it was always good to meet in a boardroom with the parties we are contracting with, to shake hands, understand face-to-face who you're dealing with. But at this day and age, it's no longer necessary. You can contract with a party in Japan, in China, in America, without meeting this person ever in your life, depending on whether the essential elements of the discussions have been met. Meaning, have you identified the product or a performance area that you want to contract on? Once you have identified such, have you agreed on the price structure? And when you deal with the pricing, Sichaba, you are dealing with a determinable commodity. Prices cannot be in Afrikaans an omtrent or an approximately or a maybe. The pricing is either 50 rand per hour, 100 rands per unit, it must be fixed and determinable. So you can't have a situation where you are contracting over a product whose price has not been fixed and determined. But more importantly, you must also agree on the delivery method or performance, mode of performance. Is this product going to be delivered? Is this product going to be collected? Is this product going to be cured? Is this product going to be done in any manner or form? So entrepreneurs must be mindful of that. The form of contracting. Electronic communications are governed by what is called the Electronic Communication Transaction Act, which determines that even through the form of an email or through the form of a WhatsApp or an SMS, you can contract without signing any paper. There are people who still believe that a contract is not a contract until there's a signature and a pen and paper having taken place. No, the law has evolved and it allows that. If I talk to you, Sichaba, and I sell masks, let's talk about masks because that's a very most familiar commodity that now of late. How to use have masks available. The moment I represent that I have masks available, you ask me the quantity, you ask me the price, I make the offer, you make the acceptance. On WhatsApp, if you press that button send and you say done deal, you give me the particulars of delivery, I deliver the masks, I have the right to invoice and claim for payment. You cannot, once we've concluded the discussion, and you change your mind for one reason or the other because the price of masks is very inconsistent. 5 rand on the one hand, 100 rand on the other, 60 rand on the other. You cannot, once you have discovered new information, want to change your mind and say, no, look, I withdraw the offer, or you just not pay me and say, no, you've gotten a better price. We have contracted on the basis of the communications that we've had. We've got other forms of agreements, such as agency agreements, for instance, where entrepreneurs can take advantage of such and say, you can always approach original equipment manufacturers, which we call them OEMs, and make available your services to market, to advertise, to facilitate the sale of their products, because some of them may not have the capacity, or some of them may not be physically and globally based in the jurisdiction of your country. You can always sell products for money from OEMs that are based in Europe, in America, and other parts of the world. You become what is called an agent, or a local agent, or a country agent, in which you sell. But once that happens, you then assume the status of an agent. And as an agent, you obviously act with the authority and mandate of the principal. And the principal must, and the law doesn't say may, it says must, authorize you to act on their behalf. In doing so, they imply on you a certain levels of authority. So if you come to me and say you're selling PPEs that are originally manufactured in India, the representations you make to me must be the representations that are inherent in the product. So you can't come around and say, when you have to, because if I buy those products, those PPEs, I must be able to give you the full description of the products based on my end user expectation, because I'm an end user and I want the products in this way. And once you represent that, yes, this equipment or these products are in accordance with the specification, I then contract either through a WhatsApp or through an SMS, through a voice call. I have contracted. When you have to deliver, you can't come around and say, but the supplier didn't tell me that this and these things are not part of the what you call it, because you are representing the supplier in my interaction with you, whether we interact through email, whether we interact through Zoom, whether we interact through Facebook inbox, whether we interact through WhatsApp. The law recognizes that the extent of the origins of the communications, if that account belongs in your name, the assumption is that it is Sichaba making the communication with me. And I have then the right, once I've delivered my part of the contract, then claim from Sichaba delivery of their part. Then I'm going to jump into what is called interjurisdictional agreements. We see them a lot in construction. Those are agreements that have got what is called overlapping jurisdiction. Others are based in a French model, others are based in an American model, others are based in a Canadian model. It is important for you as a transactor to always familiarize yourself with the nature of those interjurisdictional agreements. Usually the OEMs are the ones who dictate the jurisdiction or the laws governing the contract because they are the original equipment manufacturers. But it doesn't always follow that because they are the ones determining the type of agreements, therefore everything there will be followed. Sometimes there are implied jurisdictional aspects which are based on the legislation of the country where you are contracting from. From South Africa, for instance. Let's say you are selling cell phones, for instance. Cell phones is coupled with what is called an ICASA license, for instance. That's an implied regulatory requirement. You can't overturn that or bypass that. And ICASA's regulatory framework is based in South Africa. So we are then able to then use that and incorporate that in your contract and ensure that those contracts are understood. Does an online request for business constitute a legal agreement? Yes and no. No, in a sense that if an online request, if I send you a Facebook inbox and say, hey man, I like your ties, I like your jackets, how much are they? What is the quality? When can you deliver? That conversation, until it's concluded, it is not an agreement. It remains exactly what it is. An online request, what is called in other parts of a business, call for quotation, where someone will come to your house to do a quotation. The person can drive to your house, check your equipment, take measurements, and do a quotation. But the quotation, once you sign it, I mean, it's not an agreement until you sign it and approve it that you accept it. So it's the same with online request. If I make a request, put it online and say, does anyone sell sanitizers, for instance? Someone come and say, yes, I do have them on stock. This is my price. This is the terms of delivery. That communication is not an agreement until the other party has accepted. Like I said, acceptance does not mean that we must have a pen and paper. Acceptance can always mean, when the moment I press that send button where I say, I accept the price, then that constitutes a legal agreement in its material forms. Who has the authority to enforce commission fee agreements? Commission fee agreements are agreements existing between the agent and the principal being the supplier or the original equipment supplier. Because you cannot impose a commission agreement to me as a buyer. I come to you as Sichaba, who represent that you are acting on behalf of Vodacom to sell 123. You're acting on behalf of a company in India to sell 123. To the extent that you have engaged with me, I am the buyer, I'm the prospective buyer. Unless I accept the price structure, only then will the commission agreement be kicked on between you and the person who has promised you the commission. Because remember, a supplier may have more than one commission agents. He may have more than one sales agent, which are put in place to be able to engage with various potential buyers. So an agent can only claim commission from the principal and not from the buyer. But there are chance-taking commission agents who will go to the equipment supplier and fix a percentage and come to the buyer and also fix a percentage. Because of the liberty and the freedom of contracting, they are allowed to do that, but it is not in law enforceable to the extent that they can take you to court and claim that you are owing them commission because you are a buyer, you are not necessarily what you call. Lastly, we've asked me to find out if entrepreneurs can really take advantage of the space, can really manipulate the space, not so much manipulate, but can really enter the space as agents and capitulate on the existing opportunity. The answer is a big yes. It is a big yes because to the extent that COVID now forces people to trade in a manner that they do, it creates an opportunity for people like legal advisors to be able to peruse, vet, and analyze contracts, but also it also allows a space for those people we call transaction advisors. A transaction advisor is somebody who will always come in between an equipment supplier and the buyer. It may be a panel of buyers, and be able to then enter into agreements on their behalf based on their requirements as end users, and facilitate the fee agreement or a commission, or what is called the referral agreement. It is allowed in law. The only advice I would give for entrepreneurs wanting to enter that space is that you need to familiarize yourself with the rules of every transaction. There are various rules applicable to every transaction. Let's talk about the one that's familiar, the selling of PPEs. Selling of PPEs is a tightly regulated space because, for instance, the Hazardous Substance Act does create regulatory requirements for certain. I'll use the radiators for an example. You can't operate radiators unless you are licensed to do so. You can't be able to distribute certain equipment unless you are licensed to do so. So if you want to be an agent or a middle person in between those transactions, know exactly what you're entering yourself into. Otherwise, you're more likely to find yourself in a situation where you represent more than the authority, more than you have, or you underrepresent the authority that you have, in which case the business and financial or economic consequences are too ghastly to contemplate, in the sense that where you have underrepresented yourself, you will find yourself running at a loss in instances where you could have made money. But in an instance where you overrepresent the authority you have, you may find yourself being sued for damages, because if you come and represent that a certain PPP equipment has got 1, 2, 3, and on delivery, which has been shipped from China, shipped from India, shipped from America, it comes here, there are cost implications for shipping those products, and it comes here, I discover that those things are not there. I, as a buyer, have got a recourse against the principal, who's represented by you, and I cannot sue you more than I can sue the original equipment supplier. So in other words, you are the representative of the original equipment supplier, and you are legally liable in the same way as they are. Having that in regard, my brother, I think we need to be familiar with the fact that at the end of the day, doing business embodies some inherent risks. And one of those risks of doing business is that you must be able to know which are the hazardous areas. What are your hazards as an entrepreneur? You must eliminate your hazard to the best of your abilities, and when possible, seek advice, because the tendency now of I call them agent entrepreneurs, UEs. Agent entrepreneurs are in a rush for profit. They don't have time to double check facts. They don't have time to proofread. They don't have time to compare. They don't have time to juxtapose. All they have time for is to invoice. And the risk of speedy invoicing is that your focus is predetermined by the outcome. And once your focus is predetermined by the outcome, you miss what we call in law the meticulous detail. And if you miss the meticulous detail, you're more likely to have your contract thrown out or to expose yourself to legal litigation, especially in an agent transaction such as where there's a quick fix. Supply me with 1, 2, 3, the client is urgently in need of this. You don't familiarize yourself with the meticulous detail, you're more likely to put yourself in a worse position than you have been before you entered those transactions. So my friendly advice to a whole lot of entrepreneurs out there, COVID, yes, is a space to expand your sense of agency, but hurry slowly. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. This is enlightening. We have entrepreneurs here. We are all looking for opportunities, and for the fantastic chat. I'm going to leave myself without my video so that I can read some of the questions. But because you are close to your monitor, if you open the chat box, the chat's already there, and then we can start the conversation. Maybe let me just start with Nkululeko in the meantime, who says, hi, Sichaba and Thabo. Thank you for your insights. Generally, there is a lack of respect towards SMMEs to be paid on time when service/products have been delivered. How can we use this pandemic to address this issue, which kills many small businesses as it eats into their cash flow. People, business just delay payments and do not pay at all. Unmute. You were muted there, Thabo.
Yes, I'm unmuted now.
Yeah.
I think, look, it's true. One of the concerns that I had, which I still have, in fact, on the other side, we initiating efforts to challenge this from a national treasury point of view, is to say this pandemic, the procurement regime surrounding this pandemic has been used to consolidate the status quo, meaning to still preserve the use of huge and large established businesses at the expense of small businesses. But sometimes because of the agency of some of the procurement aspects, it becomes difficult, and we need to understand government for finding themselves in that predicament. But what we've said, and which is something we should be able to say, is that the agency to transform the economic landscape cannot be an excuse during COVID. The agency to transform the economic landscape must continue even during COVID. In fact, the Minister of Tourism made an example when they announced their guidelines for the relief fund to the risk of the court challenge that we saw happening a few weeks ago. So what we need to say is that government must continue its obligation to expedite payment of small businesses in accordance with the framework that exists, but even more so with the agency that it deserves. But at the same time, because this COVID presents an opportunity for everyone to enter the business space, we also need to be mindful of people who want to represent more than what they have. In other words, you're going to find people who say, I can sell a cup of tea, and yet they've actually never manufactured one. And that poses the risk, because at the end of the day, procurement must ensure that government spend money cost effectively, competently, and in a manner that technically suits that money. A rand must follow the rand value. The value must follow the rand, so that we don't necessarily allow fly-by-nights to rig the system just because there's a crisis. So the government has got a very difficult task of finding that balance between those who are taking chances and are not genuine entrepreneurs and those that want to rig the system. And by the way, they are there, and we must be able to avoid them at all costs.
Maybe if you can read the question from Classy.
I see there's a question. Please move back if we can see. All right. I go down with the questions. I did the same. I can hear the speaker. All right.
Let me take Classy. Classy says, do you think government can extend its procurement system of inviting suppliers to even use such communications as a means to contract? If yes, then how can government regulate supply chain of employees, WhatsApp, etc.? Do you think this will reduce the quality and accountability of procurement bid? I think this came from the comment that you made in terms of, if I've sent a WhatsApp, then we have a contract to say, to what extent can you really follow through on that one if it's like not on email or paper?
Yes, I think that is true. Government procurement system as a whole has got to transform. But you see, with government, because of the tight accountability regime attached to procurement in government, it cannot just be. The form of contracting that I was talking about was between private businesses, because it's easier, and I don't have to invite quotations. I don't have to make it publicly accessible. It's just me wanting an agent service, so I can send Thabo Masombuka an SMS and say, look, can you respond to this? And if he says yes, there's a contract. But in government, it becomes a bit tricky, because you can't use those means to procure there. Otherwise, you allow a space for a corrupt official to want to use that expediency. to do their ill-informed intentions. I think government procurement system, whilst it has to transform to take into account those realities, I don't see it being relaxed to that extent, because it will easily be open to abuse and exploitation. And I don't think we want to go to another state capture commission after COVID and say, now we're going to call it a COVID Procurement Commission of Inquiry, to start to investigate why certain things were done. Although we have to be urgent in our actions, we also need to be careful. And unfortunately, with the state, we cannot do that so expediently. I see Fulufeno says he agree, even if you have signed a contract to receive payment. I don't think this is a question. It's mainly a comment.
But I think the sentiment that's expressed there is that people can take advantage of you as an SME and not honor their side of the contract simply because you are too small and you are their major supplier.
We call it economic bulldozing. It's there. It's happening. People bulldoze SMEs. In fact, the worst form of bulldoze is that one of price reduction. There's nothing as painful as we are asked to send a quotation, and when you send a quotation, they accept your quotation, but somewhere in the middle between the delivery and the payment, they give you another price and say, look, we know you need this money more desperately than anyone else. We would have given it to you in 30 days according to our policy, but because we understand your need, we'll pay you in 15 days, but reduce this price. That's abuse. That's economic bulldozing, because you contracted on a certain price. But I do know, Sichava, and that's mostly the most painful part, we do see small businesses amending their pricing structure from time to time just because they want to get out with something better than, they say, half a loaf is better than nothing nonsense. That at least I've gotten some payment. Let me take this up. And do you know what that inculcates as a culture? Once a small business or an SME is bruised in that way, what he's going to do, he's going to take that experience into his next transaction. So in other words, what he's going to do, he's going to say, okay, because client AB has bruised me and bulldozed me, next time I'm going to be clever. Next time I'm going to do what? Next time, instead of saying my cup of tea is 8 rand, I'm now going to inflate it to 10 rand. So that in case they reduce me again, or they force me to reduce, then I know that I'm covered. And that creates an instability of pricing and an instability of consistency when you deal with small businesses. The next thing what happens, people accuse all small businesses and say, yeah, they are inflating prices, they can't price structure properly, forgetting that they are given business, and when they are given these contracts, they are also reminded, and somebody come to whisper in their ear and say, don't forget the chain, don't forget the black bag, don't forget the brown envelope. And what does that do? It inculcates a culture where someone says, in this item, instead of charging the 3 rand that is worth for this product, I'm going to inflate it to put it at 6 rand, so that the 1 rand goes to procurement officer, the 2 rand goes to the regional leader of the movement, the other 1 rand goes to another facilitator. You find that at the end of the day, the myriad of facilitators in a business deal, and as a result, it squeezes the small business, and that's why they end up inflating prices.
Luel says perhaps you confused national and global procurement laws. Says these aspects are vastly different. Global procurement is more complex than you explained.
Who's saying that now?
Luel Bungani makes that particular point. Perhaps maybe if you can just explain the difference, the major differences between both national and global procurement.
Look, the mistake we should not do is that we must not confuse procurement with contracting. Procurement is an aspect of contracting, but contracting is a global generic definition of a business agreement where you contract at arm's length as parties because you want to deal with a certain product. If I want to sell a product to some clients or consumers in the country and that product is not available in the country, it's available internationally. The moment I contact an international supplier for the provision of that, that's global transacting. It does not necessarily have to do anything with procurement. All it has to do is that I'm procuring that from an international supplier, and the method and form of procuring that may not necessarily be regulated. It may just be based on the availability or non-availability of that commodity or that product. So the two can be used interchangeably, but they don't necessarily refer to the same, because the moment I procured that, depending on how I've procured it, whatever mechanism that I've used to procure that commodity, when I distribute it in the country, I then engage contractually with my local business consumers, and that becomes, you know, a typical commercial business transaction. But the moment it involves public funds, then it must be done. And this is not a may, it must be done in accordance with the public procurement framework regime, which stipulates what processes must be followed. That's why in my answer to the gentleman who asked whether we could use the simplest form of communication even in the public sector, I was very clear that it's going to be very difficult in that space. Otherwise, it is going to be a recipe for a whole lot of abuse. It cannot really be encouraged.
Classy then might not like the answer you're going to give him, because he thought that there is a quick solution here.
No, unfortunately, it can't be.
Classy then.
So Mzolisi says government-owned companies pay suppliers mostly. Look, if you remember when 2 weeks into the COVID crisis, government advertised some guidelines and regulations for procurement, which were more of an urgent response. And I think by implication, some of those guidelines were a fundamental departure from this 30 days minimum requirement. And I think what Mzolisi is mentioning here is that, you know, it's unfair to have SMMEs paid between the period of 60 and 120 days, when in fact a mere 30 days, a mere 15 days under COVID is such a difficult period. And I know that there are discussions at both national and provincial treasuries to try to fix that. It shouldn't be a discussion point in 2020, this thing. That business throughout many years have always called for the urgent expedition of expediting of payment of small businesses. Why it's still an issue now leaves much to be desired. And it says a lot about the agency of government when it comes to the programs for economic empowerment and transformation.
Okay, we did keep Classy and Kitete. Let's just go back to Classy, who said, thanks, Thabo. This will change government's procurement system to be amended to allow contracting without signing SBD documents and also signing bid documents. At the end, you are informed that certain document was not attached in a big document, which was done deliberately. Emailing will be a way to lead a new normal on online contracting. Do you think there's a silver bullet that Classy see, or what is it?
I think maybe there is, but there must be. I think there will have to be a very serious thought. There will be thoughtfulness on that, because of the balancing act that government must at times always find themselves navigating themselves. I think it says, Thabo, I'm an architect of our industry that's been hard hit. I think this is tourism. I have a client to sign an agreement to keep me on a retainer, paying my professional fees on a monthly basis, then just with the renege on this agreement by placing their projects on hold and therefore refusing to pay my invoice of work completed till date. They put projects on hold. They used COVID lockdown as an excuse, and they have been acting in bad faith as they have behind in their invoices. They are not honoring the agreement. But there are two things. Even in construction, we've discussed this, that there's this act of God. COVID, everyone accepts that in contractual and business agreement terms, COVID-19 constitutes a vis major factor, which means it's an act of God, beyond anyone's reasonable appreciation and control. So it can be invoked in a contract to say my inability to deliver my obligations in a contract has been constrained by the following as a result of the lockdown and stuff like that. I think there's an acceptance of that. But from what I read in what she's saying is that it looks like she had a retainer agreement, done some work already, which work was completed, because in law, every work done must be remunerated or compensated in accordance with the terms and conditions of the contract. No excuse about it. You can't then use a later event, such as a COVID, to refuse to pay outstanding settlement that you should have paid, previously. So if there is suspicion of bad faith, if there is suspicion of malafide, and there is suspicion of not acting in the best interest of the contract, she's entitled to take this up and challenge the enforcement of this agreement, and then prove that the work that I've done to the extent. But if this is as a result, the retainer is suspended or non-payment is occurring as a result of COVID, they would have a legally acceptable basis for not paying, because retainers would logically follow a business activity. And if there's no business activity as a result of COVID, therefore they cannot be able to pay. But I suspect that this may be more than what the eye sees. And she's entitled to challenge that to the best of her abilities by using any lawyer of her choice to be able to challenge that particular thing. I think
as I look at Luel is still not completely satisfied with the response on the national and global procurement laws. We may not be able to fully satisfy him in this discussion, I guess, or maybe the comment was written before you completed the...
Yeah, no, maybe it's true. Maybe we didn't answer to his best ability, to the best of his satisfaction, but suffice to say that there are various international jurisdictions governing various forms of agreement, procurement of coal, procurement of certain equipment. It is true that you must consider the provisions stated in your contract. That's why the message I said to entrepreneurs was that try to familiarize yourself with the content of the agreements. It may be difficult sometimes. Some of these contracts are hugely voluminous. Some of them are written in legalese that is extremely tight and extremely difficult to comprehend. Find yourself somebody who can help and help you interpret some of these provisions without necessarily putting yourself at risk. Like I said, there are even other contracts, even in construction. The new engineering contracts have got what is called an overlapping jurisdiction, because some of the projects we implement may be taking place in various jurisdictions, one in Mozambique, one in South Africa, the other in Zambia. So you need to take into account what is relevant to those particular requirements. But I agree with him that you need to familiarize yourself, and where you are unsure, do seek legal advice instead of be able to. I see that is suggesting that we can request a short presentation of the global procurement encompassing laws, economic framework, marketing and compliance. It depends, it depends on the commodity, it depends in engineering, in energy. There are specific pro forma agreements that are used there as acceptable template by the industry. And you don't approach those with common sense. You use this particular precedents in those agreements to be able to deal with whatever aspect of the commodity that you are trading. And the long and short of it is that let's find a way to familiarize ourselves. and let's not be agent entrepreneurs. Agency, yes, will be there, but let's just avoid a situation where we are predetermined by the invoice before we look at the finer details. Because by the time something hits the fan, you find yourself with nowhere to run.
So maybe on behalf of the entrepreneurs, if I can just pause and say, given that the opportunity is now, where are the lawyers that can be able to quickly help those entrepreneurs to take advantage of the opportunity that presents? Because the process that needs a whole lot of lawyers could be suitable more for a big corporate. Where are those agile lawyers that can help entrepreneurs to be quick and agile?
I think I agree. I think the clarion call must go all out there to those lawyers who are prepared to come in, ascend into these contracts without using the generality of the form and text that we're used to as lawyers. But let's ascend into the transaction and understand what the issues are, and provide the necessary guidance to small businesses in the manner that suits their condition and in a customized format. Because let me tell you one thing, the risk and usually the dilemma in legal contracting is that a supplier gives you a pro forma contract that is developed already, and it's a take it or leave it kind of a situation. And because of your size and because of the nature of your hunger for that particular transaction, you find people agreeable to terms that are extremely unfavorable, extremely unfair, to the point where it places them in exactly the worst situations than they ordinarily would have been had they not transacted. So it is always important that, because contracting is a critical part of the business deal or of the deal making, it's critical that you also exercise your ability to influence the deal in your favor. And this is about prudent business skills to negotiate yourself into the deal or out of the deal. But to say because urgently want to run with this deal, you urgently want to do these transactions at all costs, you are more likely going to find yourself squeezed into the margin, squeezed into the corner, precisely because you needed the deal more than the supplier did. So I think the risk and the difficulty that a lot of small businesses find themselves in is that dilemma, where they must at all times, meet the conditions and the terms provided for by the supplier more than it is provided by the contract negotiator.
I guess from Lesiba Mulapo is just acknowledging the presentation, as well as Reginald. These guys are on our digital platforms, and appreciating the questions that have come through, as well as appreciating that we are reading them out loud and clear, that they can hear them. I want to also apologize to Uzandile Nshangase. He struggles to come into the chat room, and I hope he's listening to us somewhere else. I still want to make the point that the guys that have been in the game for longer are at a massive advantage, and very little has been done to make it a little bit easier as part of quality transformation for new players to find this covert space a launching pad for their businesses.
True. One of the difficulties in BE and empowerment is that the argument by a whole lot of established firms through the procurement element, or the enterprise development element specifically, has been that how can I, who has been so many years in business, be responsible for developing or upscaling what is otherwise going to be my competition. And that paradigm of dilemma has always been the delay in effective implementation of enterprise development. Because established businesses would say, I cannot breed my own competitor. And yet, in the philosophy of economic inclusivity, it's always good to have more players in the sector so that you foster economic cooperation, you foster competition, positive competition, and be able to foster availability of commodities and products by the consumers, so that the consumers can always have the ability to choose their providers and be able to benefit from a pricing point of view. So we are right. The difficulty we have here is that those who've been in the game for way too long are then able to use their muscle, are then able to use their pedigree to stifle those who are small in the market and actually force them into what we call compelled collaborative activities, where you kind of like, in construction, we call it subcontracting. A main contractor would come and say, look, you subcontract you because government forces us to do that, but under ordinary circumstances, we would not have done it. And when you look at those subcontracting agreements, they are in such a way that they do not facilitate the transfer of technical skills and capabilities as they are initially intended to do, to an extent that it becomes, a business futility of some sort. Because you enter into a business transaction, you go out of that business transaction in a worse economic conditions that you ordinarily would have been had you not entered. And that becomes a huge impediment for economic development, a huge impediment for economic transformation, if you look at it in that context.
Small business usually is in thousands and don't have a body that represents them as a unit to fight this type of fight. In your space, from the legal perspective, how come that voice is not being put together, at least from a legal perspective, to just say, this sector needs help legally?
You will be interested, Chaba, you will be interested to know that the Legal Practice Council, which is a unitary statutory body representing all legal practitioners in the country, advocates and lawyers alike, is already in a process. And we are in the center of that process. We're providing technical advice to that process to develop what is called a legal sector transformation and empowerment code, which is going to be more like your BEE code for the legal profession. And one of the things that are going to come out of that dispensation is exactly what we are referring to. That there must be some funds and initiatives. The lawyers and the advocates do already have a framework called pro bono work, which happens in civil, commercial, and sometimes, public sector litigation, where they represent various communities and stakeholders that may not have the ability to finance some of their litigation battles. So the law provides for pro bono recognition, but this charter or this sector code that we're busy developing for the lawyers is going to even make it a little bit compulsory for lawyers in commercial space, because usually what we've seen, pro bono work is only done for your non-core or non-essential areas of the legal practice. Yet the meat, the center, the substance of economic of legal litigation is in commercial transactions, where a whole lot of money is spent to fight business transactions in the highest courts of the land. So we want to make it in such a way that lawyers must have a framework where they can be able to dedicate certain specialized business services or expertise to be able to help small emerging businesses. We're talking engineering law, we're talking ICT, we're talking energy law, we're talking the ocean economy. The ocean economy is a huge area where there's legal dispute and litigation taking place based on various aspects of the various contracts. So we need to be able to have a sector code for the lawyers that's able to find a mechanism to deal with assistance of emerging entrepreneurs and members of the public in that way.
Yes, you've been in the sector, in this space for quite a long time, and you have seen it all. During this particular period as a party short, what have you been most excited about in your area of work?
Look, the most interesting part of the area of this work is that it gives you an ability to navigate yourself the various interests in this commercial interest, or negotiation of various contracts, and be able to look at it from different angles. On the one day, you will be particularly closer to a transaction where you represent huge commercial interest on behalf of a client, but on the other area, you will be representing the interest of a small emerging developmental player, and that requires you to wear your transformation attire and regalia and be able to look at the transaction as an active participant who's affected by the paradigm shift in the business sector and be able to influence these transactions to the benefit of those that deserve it more. Because I must tell you, Thabo, my brother, it is tough there because of the sense of urgency, because of the desperation, and because of the need to level the playing field. A lot of emerging businesses rush to transact. When I was still at the DTI, I used to say, we call it the look left, look right phenomenon. Look left, look right syndrome, where at Nando's or McDonald's, when COVID was not here, you would find a lot of small business players in a hurry to transact, to sign and put their signatures in those documents, because those business contracts present the prospect to see themselves as multimillionaires the next day. So they don't even wait for an opportunity for Thabo to disturb him. He looks left, he looks right, he signs quickly so that he can be able to wake up tomorrow a millionaire. Little will he realize, 3 weeks down the line, that he has signed himself into the worst contract ever. And now he'll come to government, he'll come to lawyers, he'll come to everyone to expect people to drag them out of those contracts. So it's very important that, irrespective of the crisis, irrespective of the opportunity, do give yourself some time to familiarize yourself with legal documents. They are very important. They can be a deal maker and they can be a deal breaker. Thank you very much, my brother.
Thank you so much. Deal or no deal, you can only determine that depending on the contract that you enter. Tonight has been quite informative in terms of just making sure that you protect that which you want to get as the opportunities present themselves. I'd like to thank Mr. Thabo Masombuka, former CEO at Construction Sector Charter Council, for insightful talk. To get a direct invite to tomorrow, 27th of May talk by Thebe Ikalafeng, founder of Brand Leadership and Brand Africa, please go directly to our WhatsApp number 082 088 5262 or visit the EmpowerWorks website, where you will be able to get further information. This has been Empower Entrepreneurs Digital Conversation, a COVID-19 discussion hosted by EmpowerWorks. Thank you for everyone for joining us live on the Zoom platform as well as on all our digital platforms. Good night. Make those contracts sound. Bye-bye.